Sometimes I grab my Excel sheets. Sometimes pour cold water on heat.
Back. Great start, huh? I suck at running backs. Now, let me clarify that. It's a strong statement to start out with, right? I'm as good or maybe a little better than average at scouting for zero running backs, you know? Looking for receiving upside, players who are undervalued because of their situation, or people overvaluing the way they think they can read the situation. You know, relying too much on the handcuff meta, which doesn't work, so on and so forth. But I want to get better at targeting higher value running backs because they help win too. And so I want to be able to spend some of my value on running back position outside of just playing volume. Not, especially in Dynasty, 0 RB is somewhat of a strategy more than a tactic because you're not drafting outside your startup draft. So by the time you get to year 2, all of that doesn't apply as cleanly. So you need to be able to, I want to be able to get better at targeting running back. So I've been working pretty heavily, it's a bit of an over-exaggeration. Fantasy research really isn't heavy work ever, you know what I mean? But I've been going back through my ranks and looking for players I'm high and low on and possible indicators and trends for running backs to target with value instead of just playing the 0 RB kind of strategy with lower value players. I want to be able to know when I should go get CMC or Saquon Barkley, or if I should go in on these young running backs, because it's easy to say I would, but how far would I go in? Do you trade Justin Jefferson? Because the value is definitely there, and I'm convinced of Jefferson as if we weren't already as a rookie. But you need running backs to win. My teams typically are struggling at running backs, so where do I trade some of the high-value wide receivers or the value in draft picks that I have to try and target them? Now, the off-season is typically said to be a bad time to target running backs in general. You don't know how the team's going to go. Teams draft running backs behind other running backs consistently to, what's the term? Trey Mason them, I think I've heard it referred to as. Or they get injured, or the team shifts, or Doug Peterson gets traded, drafted, dropped, cut, whatever he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I want to talk about, for a second, how I think about running back volume, how I use it to try to win, by thinking of players or ranking players, hopefully more accurately, and what that means for Miles Sanders particularly. So I guess this is a Miles Sanders video. I don't know. I don't think he's a hot button topic. There isn't a lot of conversation about Miles Sanders. It's not Miles Sanders or bust right now, but he seems to be a lot of the things I'm thinking on how to improve my running back process seem to revolve around the conversations about Miles Sanders, or at least he works as a good example for him, so I want to talk about it. So I've heard consistently, and I think it's pretty much debunked now. I mean, if I can find it, like, good people have found it as well. The coaching narratives of this coach doesn't want to use the players heavily, especially at running back, because volume very much in the NFL or in college has a large portion of it is coach-led or coach-decided or team-managed, if you will. And I've said repeatedly in numerous formats that wide receivers can force the issue of volume. If you're good, you eventually, if you're good enough, can just make teams accept it. Like an Adam Thielen, T.Y. Hilton, Stephon Diggs. But it's pretty hard to overcome it. They're relatively rare that they overcome it for successive years, like Adam Thielen, T.Y. Hilton, Stephon Diggs, so on and so forth, because most teams want to fade on draft capital. That's my the only way I have of interpreting the way some wide receiver usage just falls off after being, above average. Otherwise, we'd be targeting Jacoby Myers in New England a lot more than we are, and I'd be a lot more hyped, although I am very hyped according to ranks and consensus, on Darnell Mooney. I'm really excited, but you have to have a little, the team wants to find someone else, I think. I think that's why it happens. With running back, a similar bias exists. That's why James Robinson might make a good example for this video, but he doesn't get into all the conversations I want. So I'm not using him for this one. But coaches and teams, in some ways, can have a larger role to say in who gets volume. Players can't force the issue as much. Now, a simple example of this, using Miles Sanders, is that he played behind Saquon Barkley in college, and that's okay. That doesn't mean he's bad. Playing Saquon Barkley getting the majority of the work until he left, and then Miles Sanders got work, does not mean Miles Sanders is bad. However, we can see, and I think in college and in the NFL, a trend of good players being able to show up somehow. Miles Sanders wasn't completely uninvolved until Barkley left, although he didn't meet most thresholds. When Barkley did leave, he did, and so we're pretty much in him as a rookie. But we can see that it is an interrelationship between the other talent on the depth chart, even at running back, and how much volume you're getting. And where running back for fantasy, our thing, is so heavily reliant on volume, really the best way to rank running backs is just out and out. If you're going to use a single thing, it's the volume they get, which is why, again, why James Robinson might make a good example of this, because he got the volume. He got all the volume. Now, the problem with James Robinson is we don't know that there was elite or even decent talent behind him. Everyone behind him on that depth chart we had some hopes for, but we'd never seen him do significantly above average in any situation before that, so it's hard to say like he was suppressing a Miles Sanders talent, and therefore we can really believe in James Robinson. We can definitely believe in the production, and we can believe in his opportunity, and that's what we have with a strong teams hate his draft or lack of draft capital. What do we do with that? Now, separate question, back to Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders, even when he came into the league, there was a large contingent of the team likes to use a committee, and I think that's largely overrated. And again, if I can find it, I think smarter players than me have already found it and already knew probably. But that's largely just a narrative that we use to justify when players we like don't hit. Oh, it's a team, it's a coach. Now, if you do a large-scale study, it proves to be false. Coaches lean or adjust much more effectively based on the talent on the roster than their predisposition to usage. Now, there is an inclination towards their own usage. Coaches want to enforce their own system. That's fair. But when good players are in situations where the usage has typically been more committeeized, if you like, they get an above-average share, even compared to that committee usage that the team has typically had. That's just what happens. Now, with Peterson gone and Miles Sanders now on the depth chart, having had 2 good solid years, being a good back with a receiving floor, very clear to me he has a top 12 upside, very competent, already on the team, entrenched. I don't expect, although maybe Philadelphia always can bring in competition for him, but I'm not overly concerned with any of that. And so I thought when I went to my ranks, because he also outperformed his positional value expectation while receiving lower value expectation for his positional rank, which is one of the indicators I've been looking at. It's kind of like saying you're efficient, but instead of efficient on your raw numbers, you're incredibly efficient on lower volume for that position rank. I don't know if that's a good way of thinking about it, but I found it a pretty good indicator digging back into the past. So Miles Sanders showed up. So a little bit at least. And I was interested in him. But when I went and compared DLF's consensus ranks in Superflex with where I do my ranks, what I found is I am low. I'm actually low on Miles Sanders, and that led to some other interesting questions. Given how I understand volume, I think Miles Sanders is very good, but I don't think he innately, in and of himself, has a top 5 season in him. So the only way for him to really get outside of that top 12 tier or that top 12 upside and increase it to the maximum fantasy value, which is, that upper tier of players, is if the team is exceptionally productive and they get to the red zone much more often, and his typical workload is just much more valuable because of the team success. And I don't know. I don't tend to predict team situations improving that way or unproving, I guess, that way as much, because the one thing I know about the future is I don't know it, and it's fairly unpredictable. So I tend to find value in those types of arguments when players are being devalued because we're predicting a future that we don't know is going to happen. I'm interested in those players because their value tends to drop, and we're very often wrong about how that plays out. But predicting that a team's going to do well for a player I want to be high on has a reverse effect. I ended up being lower on Miles Sanders because of my understanding of how volume works and the fact he hasn't distanced himself in his situation through the last 2 years to have a top 5 upside by himself. So if you want Miles Sanders, and I do, you kind of have to pay a premium for him. Now he's in a value tier. I don't innately think of him as having a top 5 season in him outside of predicting maximum team success, because the team's going to, become infinitely productive like Baltimore did a year ago, or like the Chiefs are every year since Patrick Mahomes turned up, or the Seahawks had that one great year. So it can happen. I know that potential's there, but it's an extreme range of his outcomes. Now, the other argument I heard while talking about this on Twitter the other day was that with Peterson gone, essentially he was what's holding back Miles Sanders' usage. Now, so that goes to the core of why I'm down on him. I don't think he co-opts that kind of usage, and it sans the coaching staff. I think the coaching staff, in and of itself, I think the best way to take advantage or try to win or gain an edge, if you will, with coaching narratives and running back volume is to accept that they're actually better at modifying their usage towards talent than we typically give them credit for. And I'm not against that. Like, I'm not against that at all. I'm pro player and kind of, what would be the word, neutral coach? I don't care. I don't care if we want to blame the coach or say that coaches are bad or that teams should have valued players more. Like, I'm all, yeah, that's cool with me. But I don't think that on average. So the question becomes, if you're not predicting that upside through the team just becoming infinitely more productive, or, top tier having that one blowout season that teams can have, and Philadelphia's within the range of, but it's consistently been within that range. And so that bellies some belief in Carson Wentz, or some belief in whoever the coaching staff's going to be, or a rise of Jalen Reagor to help push that team into the next echelon or something. So you could go that route, or you can believe what this person was talking to me, or mentioned at least on Twitter. And I thought it was an interesting argument, because I'm talking about the average. On average, that doesn't happen. In this specific situation, not on average, Pete, not in a sample size, look at this individual situation. Could Miles Sanders actually get more volume whether the team is infinitely more successful or not? Was his usage overly capped by Peterson? And the answer is, in an individual situation like this, maybe. To be honest with you, maybe. Again, normally I'm just going to recite the average and how that's not true and coaching narratives are face. But to win, you kind of have to make bets. And sometimes you have to make less likely bets to get the maximum value. Especially, I think, if we're targeting, and I'm trying to target running backs better, you've got to go all in somewhere. So I don't think that's Miles Sanders for me, but I think that's another way of justifying the fact that he's like top 7 in Superflex, running back 7 in Superflex ranks right now, and I had him at top 12 because I just see a low ceiling. So the result is, as you can kind of see over here, that I think Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift have better paths to exciting that volume. I think they've already shown in a smaller sample on the latter half of the season that they themselves can earn that level of volume to create that potential top 5 ceiling, and with almost as likely a top 12 potential as Miles Sanders. But I think their top 5 is a little bit more likely, and so I have them over him. Now, I also have Clyde Edwards-Helaire over him, but given the way I'm doing rankings now, that requires a little bit of explanation. I pretty much see Clyde Edwards-Helaire and DeAndre Swift as the same thing. I like them both as much. The difference is with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's on a better team, in a better situation. And the way I was justifying this with Jordan McNamara on his book party thing the other day, and a live event, was that I think he could get more usage in the receiving game. And that would also require some coaching changes or coaching decisions changing, but he was underused in the receiving game in his first year. I think teams typically draft players to do what they do in college. They clearly used him in the receiving game. I think it might have just been underwhelming this year, and that raises him to about the same level as Miles Sanders for me, and we've seen a good season. He has a draft capital, and he's in a better situation. So I see them both as having top 12 upside. But I can believe in Clyde Edwards-Helaire a little bit better because I know the Chiefs are going to be good. I don't have to bet on next year just being them being the blow up team that occasionally happens. Several times it's been Atlanta, then it was Baltimore, and every now and again, well, every year we get one team that's just more productive than expected and producing all these fantasy points without being consistently, the best team every year. And normally it's from a team like Philadelphia. It's a decent team with good players that we're not low on, but we haven't really seen it yet. And so it kind of fits the description. So, I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well as Miles Sanders. I have him slightly above Sanders because I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now above Sanders, Cam Akers, and Swift. And the reason isn't because I would draft Edwards-Helaire above those guys. As my ranking sheets is now meant to show you, I have him overly high in that value tier. And so what that means, my sheet in the positional rank column, it shows you that I'm 3 higher, which and it's because within that value tier, I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire value within that tier, which means I'm happy to let someone else draft Akers and Swift and get Clyde Edwards-Helaire later, because I don't have to pay to move up to get him, and he has that top 12 ceiling. These guys have top 5 ceilings, so if I'm going for it, yes, that they're trade targets, but ultimately, and a 1-for-1 situation, I kind of like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that tier. I think his floor is safer. I think he has top 12 upside, even if I'm kind of giving up that top 5 potential. But I did kind of argue with Jordan McNamara, maybe that top 5 is there, but probably not. But at least he's on the Chiefs, right? He's young, he's got draft capital, and everything else fits. And Miles Sanders is slightly lower because, even though I value them about the same and kind of see them as the same bet, the same player in different situations, I prefer Clyde Edwards-Helaire's situation, and so I don't have to believe that it improves or that it even maintains what it has been as much as with Philadelphia. That requires a little bit more faith than Kansas City, and that's the reason they're slightly different values to me. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets drafted below all of those guys, so I like him more in terms of value. That's what my ranks are meant to show. I don't know if they're doing it successfully yet. Let me know if that makes sense. So, if I'm targeting running backs to win, which I really do think I got to get better at targeting higher value running backs that can help me win instead of the lower value running backs, instead of rookies, instead of to know when to go get Clyde Edwards-Helaire, know when to go get Cam Akers or DeAndre Swift. This is a really good time. The running backs on the come up. They have proven enough that I think we know that Akers and Swift both have top 12 upsides at least, maybe top 5 upsides. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Miles Sanders, I think, very much have top 12 upsides and decent and better floors, and their values less likely to just disappear out of nothing outside of potential age concerns, but both are fairly young. So if you're targeting running back, you just kind of got to let go of that long-term value. I'm sorry, you just kind of have to, or at least I do. So where does that leave me? Either I have to, in this situation, believe that Miles Sanders is getting less opportunity because of the coach that just left, which is against what the average says, which is what I normally lean on, or I buy into that narrative in this one particular instance. I'm not. That's why he's running back 12 for me and not running back 7. I can't bring myself to do it. And the essential reason is I've seen he did distance himself. If we look at the opportunity share, which is actually fairly sticky to year, it's one of the reasons volume is good for running back position, and I'm calculating it a certain way, so it's really best to consider my opportunity share calculation inside my data set. I don't know how well it compares to others, but essentially it's a percentage of their touches minus quarterback touches, and using positional targets to show the percentage of the offense that each player was. So Miles Sanders had a 52% opportunity share last year. Before that, he had a 48% share. Those are both decent percentages of the offense. That's a running back 1, believe it or not. Now, a top 12 running back averages, as you can see at the very top of the column, at 66%. So a player that finishes in the top 12 of running back positional ranks in PPR scoring typically on average has a 66%, but we know that Miles Sanders was RB23 this year, he was RB15 the year before, and he was hovering around 50%. That's in part because of the value he brings in the receiving game, but it's not a bad score. That is a good score. There's an opportunity share to enjoy, but it's not that highest reach, which kind of fits what I was saying. But here's the thing. Peterson has been the head coach of the Eagles since 2016, right? I think. And if we go back to 2016... and look through the opportunity scores, that are on the team for Peterson, you see much more of a committee. And this is something I was saying after Miles Sanders' first year. If it was such a feature of the coaching tree that Miles Sanders was a top 15 running back instead of a top 12, why did he distinguish himself over every other running back that Peterson had coached on that team? Now, that requires a little more exploration. For example, Ryan Matthews here, who it was nice to have a reminder of him. I was a big fan at the time. Always pretty good cheap value. I thought he was a pretty good talented player. But again, never really had that top 5 ceiling in him. Had top 12 season. It kind of the same thing. But this was the last year he played in the NFL. He was 29 years old. He started 8 games, played 13, something like that. And so this 33% is not of Ryan Matthews at the height of his career, right? This is the end of career Ryan Matthews, and so we're not looking at what the best player could do. And he was basically sharing the field or sharing the opportunity with Darren Sproles, who, like Frank Gore, just kind of was ever living, so you can't really judge that by age. But he was sharing the backfield in 2016. When we go to 2017, you've got Jay Ajayi, who I had a lot of hopes for, but he didn't distinguish himself significantly in a Peterson system. He got a 38% target share. You move up again to the next year. In fact, LeGarrette Blount's the one who sucked up a lot of the volume, and he became the value on that team at running back that year. The next year, Jay Ajayi just dropped, so he wasn't on the field quite as much, and instead it goes to Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement, and Josh Adams, this three-headed nightmare of a committee that really provided not much fantasy value consistently on a week-to-week basis. And the myth, I think, of the Peterson committee, it ingrains itself in the mind of the fantasy or dynasty community. But the next year, Miles Sanders comes along and gets 48%. That's the highest share of the offense that any player through this time with Peterson ever had. That to me means that he was forcing down other players at the position. Even Jordan Howard, who we know has had a top 12 season and is a pretty significantly talented rusher, especially in 2019 and at his age, and he was minimizing him to a 26% share and getting the majority of the opportunity in that offense. Moving on to 2020, Boston Scott and Jordan Howard are still on the team, but Boston Scott can't really get above a 28% share, and Miles Sanders actually increased his share in the offense by a couple of percent, but he did increase his role even if he finished lower in terms of position rank, which is where he showed up on my indicator. He's still getting a significant volume, but he was getting more points per game than he was getting volume based on his positional rank, so he triggered in my indicator. He was playing well on the opportunity he was getting and probably ended up lower than he should have been. We could also look at that through touchdown rate and some other factors. I don't know how that breaks down. I just kind of jumped into it. So, what I'm saying is that, like a Saquon Barkley, he Saquon Barkley'd everyone else the last 2 years. Now, Jordan Howard and Boston Scott, you can debate if you like, but I think they're proficient, good enough runners. I do think there is an argument to make that Peterson used them more heavily in the red zone, which other coaches might not like to do. So that's where you get your edge. But ultimately, Miles Sanders has already proved to be more talented than any other running back at that stage of his career that he ever had. And I know DeMarco Murray was there for a little while and had a low season with 700 yards, and the year he left and went to his next team, he actually had another 1,000-yard season, because the rumor at the time was he was coming off a 329 touch season, so he was done. But then he left the Eagles and had another 1,000-yard season. So again, a team old guy wins again, I guess, is the lesson there. So I know that happened, but ultimately, even discounting DeMarco Murray, who was exceptionally talented in a fairly good era of his career, maybe he did have lag off that high-touch season, I don't know. But I know that Miles Sanders has literally distinguished himself and was allowed, as far as coaching and team coaching tree is allowed to allow, or has control to allow, a larger opportunity share than anyone else on the field. That, to me, suggests that the average is still true. Peterson adjusted to the talent on his roster. He gave Miles Sanders, as much as he can give opportunity to the running back, as much more opportunity than he gave to any other player that he coached while being the head coach of the Eagles. So Miles Sanders already did it. That doesn't suggest to me he was being held down. Instead, it suggests to me this is what Miles Sanders can do. And to throw another comparison on here, which just coincidentally accurately reflects how I feel, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had about a 50% opportunity share. I think that's what these guys are. They're incredibly talented. They're good players. They don't, in and of themselves, have a top 5 season in them, and that's okay. Most people don't have a carry in them, and most NFL players don't have a top 24 season in them. We're talking about players co-opting 50% of a team's opportunity. As much as opportunity means for fantasy, it also says something about their ability. Both of these players are significantly talented and did fairly well. This in Clyde Edwards-Helaire's rookie season. Miles Sanders was in his sophomore season, second season last year. And he also had around about a 48% opportunity share that first year when he was a rookie. They're good players. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying there's no real reason to suspect that opportunity was held down because of the coaching when they significantly distanced themselves from everyone else on the depth chart the way that the team didn't allow, and I hate bunny rabbit ear finger quotes, but it requires it for this argument, I'm sorry, than any other running back. Like, if that was true, then they shouldn't have got above 30-40%. That as far as a team has control of it, they already seem to have accepted this is a different kind of player who should get a larger role than we typically give to our running backs. Now, is there still a path? Yeah, there definitely is still a path, and I could be wrong. Like, in an individual situation, the average is just a fallacy. So if you disagree on that, and you think, it's just a couple of red zone carries a game extra, that could be Peterson's influence. Honestly, that's why I said at the start, maybe. Yeah, maybe. That's possible. And honestly, 50-50 bet. I'm not saying I have large-scale evidence for this individual. I'm not in Peterson's head. I'm not in the room. I don't even know how to run football, so what would I know? But I do know, comparing him to past players, he looks like an incredibly good running back with an incredibly good opportunity share that should continue into next season. And outside of a narrative, a story that we tell ourselves, there's no real reason to believe that Peterson was the reason that he wasn't getting a couple of extra red zone touches, which means that the only path to him having a higher upside than top 12 is the team being exponentially more productive next season, which again is possible. So if you like Miles Sanders, you have another out just in case I am right and that doesn't happen. That's not how it works. Then he can still happen. He could just get more touchdowns next season because of variance, because of the team being more productive, because Jalen Rager carrying and everything I said before. So it's still possible. Don't want to discourage you from not. I like Miles Sanders a lot, but I think I'm staying pretty firm on my rank. I think Swift, Akers have more upside. As much as you can judge between top 5 and top 12, does it really matter? Both would be awesome. Yeah, but top 5 helps you win more than top 12. It's very hard to predict top 12 at all, let alone top 5. So we're throwing darts across over a house, hoping to hit a target in the bullseye to do it at all. To be very clear, there's not a lot that helps us here, but that's my thought process and what leads me to having him as a top 12, not top 7 guy. There's just other guys who I think I might hit that dart, that bullseye over the house more often by using them as my darts. This metaphor got out of control quick, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? Like him a lot, and there are just a couple of other players, and since Clyde Edwards-Helaire typically draft under all of them, that's why I have him at the top of my value tier, just because if I have to choose between all of them, just on average, I'll take the same floor with a similar ceiling for less. Thanks. And that's hopefully what my ranks say. But anyway, just some thoughts on running back value and how it works. Some of that is stuff that I just know, like the average teams, even at running back, players are able to distance themselves compared to past players on the roster in terms of the opportunity they co-opt for themselves. But yes, there is a team and coaching component much more at wide receiver. And it comes down to, and don't let any nerd make you think otherwise, a maybe. You do just get to flip a coin. I think it's going to happen, and that's where it happens, in the intricate mix of this individual situation. Is this player just have a little more opportunity in him, and maybe situation, maybe team success was holding him back, and there is the realm of maybe. So go all in if you believe it is. Me, I'm only going to get him if he falls a little bit, or his value is a little lower in my league to wherever has him on my roster. That's what I think is going to happen. But again, I suck at running back. I told you that at the start, so just be aware. All right, I'm getting out of here. This is a long video, and I thought it was going to be a quick one. Appreciate it. Check out DLF. That's where all the ranks I'm talking about are held. Check out FS Spaceman if you're interested in Opportunity Score. He was the one tracking it this year for DLF, so I started calculating it myself. And make sure you tell me how much I suck in the comments. That's all I ask, really. Appreciate it. Take care. I got nothing. See you later. Bye.
Do you have the time?